Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my Fighting Fantasy Gamebook retrospective. And today we've reached books 22 and 23, Robot Commando and Masks of Mayhem. Now I wasn't too keen on these way back in the day, so let's see what they're like when I revisit them. Now when I saw this cover, right, from Robot Commando back in the day, my sort of heart jumped for joy. It's like a Transformers robot, Transformers, robots in disguise. Those weird robots that are sort of humans and they transform into a plane or a car. There's one of them in this story, and he's fighting a dinosaur. What could be better than that? I mean, that's an image for the 8-year-old boy in all of us, isn't it? That just looks great. Fantastic cover by David Martin. And what it reminded me of one of my favourite comic strips in 2000 AD, one of the very first strips back in the early 70s, called Flesh. And it had this brilliant idea, right, that in the future, the world is massively overpopulated. So they create a time machine. And all these cowboys and ranchers go back in time to prehistoric age to farm dinosaurs. And that was the brilliant premise of the whole strip. And I used to love that strip. And I thought this might be something similar. And in fact it is, except that it's set on another planet, right? And you're farming dinosaurs on another planet. And then the planet is invaded, right, by these aliens. And you decide on your own you're going to take these aliens on. And the first thing you do when you see these alien spacecraft coming overhead is you go into your house to get your sword. What's that going to do? Bloody useless. Anyway, so it's written by other Steve Jackson. He's come back. The Steve Jackson who wrote Scorpion Swamp and from Demons of the Deep. So he's done 2 great adventures before. It's like Flesh from 2000 AD. It's got robots and dinosaurs in it. Everything's going to be good, right? Jesus Christ, I was bored. Oh my God, I was bored. It took me ages to play this book, to do this review. I really had to push myself through it. I had to keep putting it down. I was so bored. The book starts off, right, these aliens, they put everyone to sleep. I kind of felt the same about this book. Anyway, the problem with this book is this, right? It assumes that robots and dinosaurs are intrinsically interesting. And really, they're kind of not. Dinosaurs are great when you're a kid. I used to know all the dinosaurs' names, right? But they're just reptiles. They're just animals. You can't communicate with them. You can't interact with them. They're not very interesting. They're a bit thick. You just have to fight them. Similarly, this book is all about, you start out with a particular kind of robot, and then you can change to different robots, right? You can put yourself into different robots so they can do different things. And the robots are really well described. But again, you can't interact with a robot. It's just a machine. So to tell you the truth, the 2 main elements, robots and dinosaurs, are pretty dull. I'm not that interested in, the different robots you can get. I suppose if you like that program Robot Wars with Craig Charles, do you remember that? I suppose it might be interesting, but for me it wasn't interesting. And you set off, right, and you're on your own on this planet. And although you go to different cities, actually, Steve Jackson has set it up rather like Scorpion Swamp, so that you can go in between the cities. It's like a grid, right? And not very much interesting happens. He's designed the game so that there are 3 different ways you can defeat the aliens, which is quite interesting, except that only one of the ways is really that interesting. The other 2 ways are pretty generic. Pretty dull, to be honest. So even that didn't really whet my appetite. I struggled to get interested in this one. I still love that wonderful cover by David Martin. The interior artwork is done by our friend Gary Mays. He's become the sort of in-house sci-fi illustrator now for this range. And his illustrations of this book are sort of halfway between being atmospheric and being comic book. And they didn't really get me interested in the action, I'm going to be honest. They're fine. There's not a single image which has really stayed with me, to be honest. So this whole book doesn't really stay with me. I think, I'm going to be honest, in this series so far, I found this the dullest one to date. I couldn't get into it on any level at all. It just really bored me. So I'm sorry to robot fans and dinosaur fans, but this is not my favourite. But the next book is Masks of Mayhem. And yet again, look at that cover. One of my favourite covers in the range. It's this stone golem running towards you. And it kind of looks like he's in an exercise video. It's hammer time, you know. Look, it's fantastic. So a great cover by John Sibbick. And also talking about artwork, there's reason to celebrate here, my friends, because it sees the return of Russ Nicholson. Yes, from the original books. Warlock of Firetop Mountain. He's back with his very distinctive artwork, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because that's the best point about this book. Now, this sees the return of Robin Waterfield. Now, you remember, his first book was Rebel Planet, which I really, really liked. I thought was one of the best of the first 20 books. So I was looking forward to this. And this is his first book in the fantasy range, in the fantasy world. And also in You Are the Hero, Jonathan Green's history of this series. Robin Waterfield nominated this as his favourite book of the ones he did for the series. So I thought, wow, let's get on with this, right? Now, you remember those of you who saw my Rebel Planet video, right? One of the things I said about Rebel Planet was it was sort of overwritten. It had a very elaborate science fiction plot that was thoroughly thought through. And Robin Waterfield, the introduction for that book is quite long. It gives you lots of context for your adventure. This one is underwritten, right? So the start of the book is ridiculously simple. You're a king of a city, right? One day, your wizard calls you and he says, look, mate, there's this witch, right? She's got some 12 golems, and 11 of them have got masks and they come into life. You're going to have to go and kill her. And apparently you just go, right? Your wizard tells you to go somewhere, leave your people behind, go off and probably get killed by some enchantress in the hills, and you just go. Later on, right, you find out that the text tells you you've realised that there's a traitor in your midst. Yeah. No shit, Sherlock. A wizard that just tells you to sod off and leave your people without a leader. I wonder who it could be. Incidentally, right, for those people who played the game, when you realise, oh yeah, it might be that magician who works for me, actually, trying to get me out of the way, when you've become Einstein, then what it is, right, his name gives you a clue as to which paragraph to go to. Now, here is his name. Now, which paragraph would you go to? 149, yes? Yeah, that's where I went. But no, it's just 40. How crap is that? I mean, really. And that's just one of many things about the safe path of this book that irritates the crap out of me, right? So at one point, right, you've got to get the Horn of Heaver. It's very important, the Horn of Heaver, right? And to get the Horn of Heaver from Heaver, you have to kill a saber-toothed tiger. Now, so you go off into the bush to find a saber-toothed tiger, and then suddenly you're in this kind of snakes and ladders game, right? Where that you roll a dice and the tiger goes two squares west. Then you roll a die for yourself and you go 2 squares east. And it's like, this is completely arbitrary. Instead of it being down to your skill and your gamecraft, it's just down to pure luck whether you get this tiger or not. Later on, right, you're swimming across this pool. And you have to fight an alligator, as you do when you swim across pools, right? And then you have to roll a dice. And purely based on this dice throw is whether, when you're swimming underneath the alligator to kill him by his belly, just underneath you just happens to be a skeleton king who's sitting in the mud and the slime at the bottom of the pond. And he's got an object which is absolutely vital to you winning the whole game. Completely arbitrary. Then, at another point in the game, you have to suddenly go into this marshland, which you're never told is actually important to enter, to meet a wizard who gives you 2 absolutely vital clues. And then what really annoyed the crap out of me in this game, right? You're going towards this swamp, right? And you come across this lady who's dying. She's bleeding to death. And, you talk to her and she says, whatever you do, go straight in the marsh. So you go straight in the marsh and you fall straight slap bang into some quicksand and die. In fact, she told you completely the wrong thing. If you go straight, you die. If you go to the left, then you find the wizard. That's annoying. God, that's annoying. I quite like the bit when you get to the enchanted glade and you hold up the 2 things and you go through this void to meet this sort of witch enchantress who will help you. I quite like that imagery, But there's too many moments in this book where it says, do you want to go left or right? You go right and you fall down a pit and die. Or some iron grill goes behind you and you're trapped. It's just so arbitrary. It's kind of irritating, actually. And then another thing that slightly irritated me, you get to the end, right, and you think you're going to have to face 11 golems, right? Because the whole story's been about how these golems, they've got masks on that turn them into living things. You think, wow, I've got 11 golems to fight. But actually what you do is, you turn up, and you remember this spectral army's promised you their help. So you say, hello, spectral army, can you come and help me? And they just kill all the golems. What? That's just rubbish. It's just rubbish. I'm sorry, it's just rubbish. So the thing is that I really wanted to like this book, but actually I just found it really irritating. It was just silly. And the only thing that got me through it was the artwork. I love the cover by John Civic, and Russ Nicholson's artwork is fabulous. It brings, the interior artwork has not been so good in the last few books, but the artwork here is so atmospheric. Look at this wonderful picture of Morgana, the enchantress who you have to kill, leaping from her throne. It's fantastic. This is the spectral army coming to you across the lake. Wonderful imagery, so atmospheric. I think Nicholson's artwork is a reason to buy this book. It's so enjoyable, it's so interesting. But the safe path is so annoying. It had me biting my lip on several occasions. So I'm sorry, I'm going to give a negative report on these two books. I really wanted to go back and like them, but they really got on my nerves. You know what we need? We need Jacko, Steve Jackson, the real Steve Jackson, maybe to come back and do some brilliant revisionist take on the fantasy genre. I wonder if that could happen.